The sickening slap echoed across the Colorado General Store as Martha Higgins struck Catherine Gregory across the cheek, sending the blue ribbon in Catherine's carefully arranged auburn hair tumbling loose. The crowd of Saturday shoppers fell silent, their collective breath held in shock at the public humiliation. "You dare show your face in town after what your father did to my Robert," Martha's voice trembled with fury. "Your wedding tomorrow is a mockery. No decent man would marry into your family." Catherine stood frozen, her hand pressed against her stinging cheek, feeling the ribbon that had once secured her braided chignon now hanging limply from a few strands of hair. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back furiously. At 21, she had endured too much already to break down in front of the entire town of Silver Creek. "Mrs. Higgins, my father's debts have nothing to do with me," Catherine managed, her voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling of her hands. "And Thomas Wilkes is a good man who's marrying you for your land, nothing more," Martha spat, her grief over her husband's financial ruin at the hands of Catherine's gambler father twisting her features. "Everyone knows it." The whispers began immediately, rustling through the store like autumn leaves. Catherine felt each one like a physical blow. The shame of her father's reputation had followed her for years in this town, but never had it been so blatantly thrown in her face. Her upcoming marriage to Thomas Wilkes, a cattle baron 20 years her senior, had been arranged not out of love but necessity. Her family needed the security, and he needed her family's strategically located ranch. "That's quite enough, Mrs. Higgins." The deep voice cut through the murmurs. The crowd parted as a tall man in a dust-covered duster stepped forward. Catherine recognized him immediately. Jackson Turner, the quiet, solitary cowboy who had recently taken work at the Thompson Ranch neighboring her family's property. Though he'd been in town only 3 months, his reputation as a skilled horseman who kept to himself had spread quickly. His hazel eyes, normally cool and distant, now blazed with a quiet intensity as he positioned himself between Catherine and Mrs. Higgins. "The lady doesn't deserve your scorn. Whatever grievance you have with her father is between you and him," Jackson said, his voice carrying that slight Texas drawl that marked him as an outsider in their Colorado town. Mrs. Higgins huffed, drawing herself up. "You're new here, Mr. Turner. You don't know what that family has done." "I know enough to recognize when someone's being unfairly treated," he replied evenly. He turned to Catherine, and his expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Miss Gregory, I believe this is yours." To Catherine's astonishment, Jackson bent down and retrieved the blue ribbon that had fallen to the wooden floor. Their fingers brushed as he handed it to her, and she felt an unexpected jolt of warmth at the brief contact. "Thank you, Mr. Turner," she murmured, clutching the ribbon tightly. "You do well to stay out of matters that don't concern you," called a voice from the back. Thomas Wilkes himself, his substantial frame moving through the crowd with the confidence of a man accustomed to deference. At 41, with salt and pepper hair and cold eyes, he looked more like a business partner than a prospective groom. "My fiancé and I can handle our own affairs." Jackson nodded once, stepping back. "Of course, Mr. Wilkes, just offering assistance to a lady in distress." Catherine watched something pass between the two men, a silent assessment, a measuring of worth. Then Wilkes placed a possessive hand on her arm. "Come, Catherine, we're leaving." As Wilkes steered her toward the door, Catherine glanced back over her shoulder. Jackson stood watching them go, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. The blue ribbon dangled from her fingers, torn and dirty, much like her hopes for any happiness in her impending marriage. The gossip followed them out into the dusty main street of Silver Creek. The year was 1878, and the once wild frontier town had grown into a respectable settlement, complete with a church, school, and the trappings of civilization. But beneath the veneer of propriety ran the same harsh judgments and unforgiving nature of the West. "You shouldn't have engaged with that woman," Thomas said stiffly as they walked toward his waiting carriage. "It reflects poorly on both of us." She struck me in public, Thomas, Catherine replied, her voice low. Was I supposed to simply accept it? You were supposed to conduct yourself with the dignity befitting my future wife. He helped her into the carriage with efficient, impersonal hands. Your father's reputation already makes this union difficult enough without you creating scenes. Catherine sat rigidly beside him as the carriage began to move, the torn ribbon still clutched in her hand. Her wedding was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at the church, and with each passing moment, it felt more like a sentence than a celebration. I didn't create a scene. I was defending myself, she said, knowing even as she spoke that her words would fall on deaf ears. Thomas sighed heavily. This marriage will provide security for your family and legitimacy for you. In return, I expect obedience and proper behavior. Is that understood? Catherine nodded mutely, turning to look out the window as they passed the town's edge. In the distance, she could see a lone rider on a chestnut horse, Jackson Turner, heading back toward the Thompson ranch. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to wonder what it would be like to ride freely across the open land, answerable to no one but herself. The Turner family Bible rested heavily on Catherine's lap as she sat alone in her bedroom that evening, the torn blue ribbon serving as her bookmark. Outside her window, the summer evening painted the Colorado mountains with strokes of purple and gold, but she found no comfort in the beauty. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, expecting her mother or perhaps one of the house servants. Instead, her younger sister Emma slipped through the door, her face worried. At 18, Emma still possessed the innocence that Catherine felt had been stripped from her over the past difficult years. "Are you truly going through with it tomorrow?" Emma asked, sitting beside Catherine on the bed. "Marrying Mr. Wilkes," Catherine sighed, touching the torn ribbon. "What choice do I have? Father's gambling debts have left us nearly destitute. This house, this land, it's all we have left. Mr. Wilkes's offer was timely. But you don't love him." "Love is a luxury we can't afford," Catherine replied, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "Mr. Wilkes will ensure the ranch remains in our family name and that you and Mother are provided for." Emma took her sister's hand. "I heard about what happened in town today. People are talking." "People always talk," Catherine said wearily. "What are they saying now? That Mr. Turner stood up for you when no one else would, that he looked at you in a way Mr. Wilkes never has." Catherine felt heat rise to her cheeks. Mr. Turner was simply being gentlemanly, nothing more. "Is that why you're keeping the ribbon he retrieved for you?" Catherine glanced down at the torn blue silk. "It's my favorite ribbon, that's all." Emma wasn't convinced. "I've seen him watching you when he rides past our property, and I've seen you watching him too." "Emma, please," Catherine said, closing the Bible. "Don't make this harder than it already is, even if there were. Feelings which there aren't, what could possibly come of it? Mr. Turner is a drifter with no property, no prospects. Father would never allow it." "Father isn't in a position to allow or disallow anything after what he's done," Emma pointed out. "And Mr. Turner might be more than he appears." Before Catherine could respond, another knock came at the door, louder this time. Their mother entered, her once beautiful face lined with worry. "Catherine, Mr. Wilkes is here to speak with you. He says it's urgent." Dread pooled in Catherine's stomach as she set aside the Bible and followed her mother downstairs. Thomas Wilkes stood in their modest parlor, his expression thunderous. "Would you care to explain this?" he demanded without preamble, thrusting a letter toward her. Catherine took it with trembling fingers, scanning the contents quickly. It was a letter from the bank addressed to her father, detailing yet another unpaid loan. "I've never seen this before," she said honestly. "I don't understand what, your father has mortgaged your ranch 3 times over," Thomas said, his voice cold. "The property that was supposed to join with mine through our marriage is worthless, encumbered by debt that would take years to clear." Catherine's mother gasped. "George promised me he'd stopped gambling months ago." "Clearly he lied," Thomas said without sympathy. "I cannot and will not enter into a marriage based on such deception. The wedding is off." The words hung in the air like gunsmoke. Catherine should have felt devastated, but instead a strange sense of relief washed over her. "Mr. Wilkes, surely we can come to some arrangement," her mother began desperately. "Catherine is blameless in this." "That may be so, but I'm a businessman, not a charity," Thomas replied. "I'll bid you good evening, ladies. I suggest you prepare yourselves for the bank's representatives. They'll be coming for the property soon enough." With that, he placed his hat back on his head and left, the front door closing with terrible finality behind him. Catherine's mother collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. "What will we do now? Where will we go?" Catherine knelt beside her, taking her hands. "We'll find a way, Mother, we always have." But as the reality of their situation sank in, Catherine knew their options were painfully limited. By morning, the news of her broken engagement would spread through town like wildfire, along with the revelation of her father's latest deception. The scorn she had faced today would be nothing compared to what awaited her family tomorrow. She climbed the stairs back to her room in a daze, pausing at the small window at the landing. In the distance, beneath the rising moon, a rider approached their property not on the main road, but across the open grassland. Even in the dim light, she recognized the silhouette of Jackson Turner on his chestnut horse. What business could he have here at this hour? Catherine watched as he approached the barn rather than the house, dismounting with fluid grace before disappearing inside. Curiosity overrode her despair, and she made her way quickly back downstairs and out the kitchen door. The night air was cool against her skin as she crossed the yard to the barn, the torn ribbon still clutched in her hand. As she neared the doors, she heard low voices, Jackson's distinctive drawl, and another voice she recognized with a start as her father's. "You're certain about this?" Her father was saying. "The papers are legitimate," Jackson replied. "The deed is clear. The gold claim is worth at least $15,000. Catherine froze. Gold claim? What was her father involved in now, and why would you do this for me, for my family? Her father's voice was suspicious. "I have my reasons," Jackson answered simply. "Do we have a deal?" Catherine couldn't contain herself any longer. She pushed open the barn door, startling both men. Her father looked haggard, guilty. Jackson appeared composed, though surprise flickered briefly in his eyes. "What's going on here?" she demanded. "Father, what new scheme are you hatching?" George Gregory winced at his daughter's tone. "Catherine, this isn't what you think. Mr. Turner was just explaining to your father that I've purchased all the outstanding loans on your property," came a new voice. Catherine turned to see an older man emerge from the shadows of the barn. Samuel Thompson, owner of the neighboring ranch and Jackson's employer. "Mr. Thompson? I don't understand," Catherine said, confusion replacing her anger. "It's quite simple, my dear," Thompson said kindly. "Your father came to me weeks ago, desperate to save your family from ruin. I wasn't inclined to help, given his reputation, until Jackson here convinced me there was value in consolidating your property with mine." Catherine looked between the three men, her mind racing. "So our ranch will remain yours," Jackson interjected quietly. "That's the arrangement. Mr. Thompson purchases the debt, your father signs over a small parcel of unused land as partial payment, and you keep your home. The parcel happens to contain access to water that would benefit my cattle operation," Thompson explained. "A fair trade, I'd say." Catherine's gaze locked with Jackson's. "Why would you help us this way?" Something flickered in his eyes, something warm and genuine that made her heart beat faster. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Gregory." Her father shuffled uncomfortably. "Catherine, I was going to tell you after I'd fixed everything." Wilkes's proposal seemed the easiest solution, but then Jackson arrived in town and suggested this alternative to Thompson. "Mr. Wilkes has called off the wedding," Catherine said flatly. "He discovered your latest bank loan." George Gregory paled. "Then this arrangement is even more crucial." "Samuel, do we still have a deal?" Thompson nodded, producing papers from his coat. "We do." "Sign here and your family keeps their home." As her father signed the documents with trembling hands, Catherine stepped closer to Jackson, who stood slightly apart from the others. You've been planning this for some time, she said softly. Why? Jackson looked down at her, his expression softening. I recognized something in you the first time I saw you riding along your property line, a kind of quiet strength. When I learned of your situation from Thompson, I couldn't stand by and watch Wilkes take advantage. Catherine's breath caught. You don't even know me. I'd like to, though, he replied simply, his gaze dropping to the torn ribbon still clutched in her hand. May I? Wordlessly, she handed him the ribbon. To her surprise, he reached up and gently gathered her loosened hair, his fingers surprisingly deft as he tied the ribbon back into place. The simple gesture, performed with such care, brought unexpected tears to her eyes. There, he said softly, his fingers lingering for just a moment before he stepped back. Much better. The morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the turmoil in Catherine's heart. Word of her broken engagement had spread through town faster than she'd anticipated, thanks to Thomas Wilkes himself, who had wasted no time in publicly declaring himself the victim of the Gregory family's deception. Catherine stood on the front porch of their ranch house, watching as riders approached not bank representatives or angry creditors as she had feared, but Samuel Thompson and Jackson Turner. Behind them came a wagon driven by Emma, who had gone to town early for supplies. Good morning, Miss Gregory, Thompson called as they neared. I trust you slept well knowing your home is secure. Catherine managed a small smile. As well as can be expected, Mr. Thompson, thank you again for your intervention. Her gaze drifted to Jackson, who sat tall and easy in his saddle, the morning sun highlighting the planes of his face. He tipped his hat to her, a simple gesture that somehow conveyed more than words could. Emma pulled the wagon to a stop, her face flushed with excitement. Catherine, you won't believe what's happening in town. Everyone's talking about how Mr. Wilkes called off the wedding, but they're also talking about how Jackson Turner stood up for you yesterday. Catherine shot her sister a warning look, but Emma continued undeterred. Martha Higgins is being shunned by half the ladies in town for striking you, and Thomas Wilkes was seen boarding the eastbound train this morning, apparently leaving for Denver indefinitely. Emma, please, Catherine said, embarrassed by her sister's frankness in front of their guests. Jackson dismounted, a hint of amusement in his eyes. It seems your reputation is on the mend, Miss Gregory, while Wilkes's has taken a turn. People are fickle, Catherine replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. The ribbon Jackson had tied back in place the night before still held, though she had carefully repaired the tear. Some are, Thompson agreed, dismounting as well, but others see clearly. Jackson here has a good eye for character. It's why I hired him on site 3 months ago. Catherine's father emerged from the house, looking more rested than he had in weeks. The burden of secret debts lifted from his shoulders had visibly lightened him. Samuel Jackson, welcome, he said, extending his hand to Thompson. I've had the property line markers placed as we agreed. The water access is officially yours. As the men discussed the details of their arrangement, Emma pulled Catherine aside, her voice low with excitement. Jackson Turner isn't just some drifting cowhand, she whispered. I heard in town that he sold a successful ranch in Texas before coming here. He's been looking for new property to develop. Catherine's eyes widened. Why would he sell a successful ranch? Something about wanting a fresh start after his brother died, Emma replied. But Catherine, don't you see? He could have bought our ranch outright if he wanted to, but instead he arranged to save it for us. Before Catherine could process this information, Jackson approached them, his hat in his hands. Miss Gregory, might I have a word with you, privately? Emma grinned and quickly excused herself, practically skipping back to help unload the wagon. Catherine felt suddenly nervous as she followed Jackson to the shade of the large oak tree that stood in their front yard. Your sister seems pleased with herself, Jackson observed with a smile. Emma has always been too romantic for her own good, Catherine replied, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. I apologize if she's made you uncomfortable. Not at all. In fact, she reminds me why I came to Silver Creek in the first place." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I left Texas because after my brother's death, the ranch we built together held too many painful memories. I wanted somewhere new, somewhere I could start fresh. And you chose our little town." Catherine asked, finding it difficult to believe such a man would settle in their remote corner of Colorado by chance. Jackson's smile deepened, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "I chose it because 6 months ago, I attended a cattle auction in Denver where I saw a young woman with auburn hair and a blue ribbon stand up to an unscrupulous buyer who was trying to cheat an elderly rancher. That woman was you, Catherine." Catherine's breath caught. "I remember that auction. The buyer was trying to claim the old man's signature was forged. You produced witnesses to verify it, stood your ground even when the buyer threatened legal action," Jackson said, admiration clear in his voice. "I inquired after you, learned you were from Silver Creek, and when I decided to leave Texas, well, I found myself drawn here. You came to Colorado because of me." Catherine could scarcely believe what she was hearing. "I came to see if the woman I couldn't stop thinking about was as remarkable as I remembered," he admitted, stepping closer. "She is." The sincerity in his eyes made Catherine's heart race. No man had ever looked at her that way, not with calculation or assessment of her worth, but with genuine admiration and something deeper. "Mr. Turner Jackson, I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Say you'll allow me to court you properly," he replied, taking her hand gently in his. "No arrangements, no business deals. Just a man asking permission to know a woman better." Catherine thought of all the twists and turns that had brought them to this moment: her father's debts, Thomas Wilkes's proposal, the public humiliation that had almost broken her spirit. And then this man who had seen something in her worth following across state lines, worth fighting for. "Yes," she said simply, the word feeling right on her tongue. "I would like that very much." Jackson's smile broadened and he reached up to touch the blue ribbon in her hair. "This suits you. A woman of strength should wear her colors proudly." Then, with a gentleness that belied his weathered exterior, he leaned forward and pressed the softest of kisses against her temple, just where the ribbon met her hair. The gesture was chaste, respectful, but Catherine felt it down to her toes, a promise of something true and lasting. Silver Creek transformed in the weeks that followed. The scandal of Catherine's broken engagement faded, replaced by curious interest in her blossoming courtship with the mysterious Texan. Jackson Turner proved to be more than just a handsome face. He was a skilled rancher with innovative ideas that soon had the struggling Gregory property operating more efficiently than it had in years. Catherine found herself looking forward to their daily rides across the combined properties, during which Jackson would point out improvements he envisioned and listen attentively to her own suggestions. Unlike Thomas Wilkes, who had dismissed her knowledge of the land as inconsequential, Jackson valued her insights. "This valley would be perfect for the new breeding stock," he said one afternoon as they sat on horseback overlooking a sheltered meadow. "Protected from the worst of the winter storms, but with enough grazing to sustain them. The creek tends to flood this area in early spring," Catherine cautioned. "We'd need to build up the eastern bank to protect any structures." Instead of ignoring her warning, Jackson made notes in the small leather journal he carried. "Good thinking. We could use the stone from that ridge to create a natural barrier." The word "we" didn't escape Catherine's notice. Jackson had been careful not to presume too much about their future, but she found herself increasingly unable to imagine the ranch or her life without him in it. As summer gave way to fall, Catherine and Jackson's courtship deepened. He joined the Gregory family for Sunday dinners, charmed her mother with his impeccable manners, and even managed to forge a tentative friendship with her father, who seemed genuinely committed to redemption. "He's going to ask you to marry him," Emma predicted one evening as the sisters prepared for bed. "I saw him speaking with father in private yesterday, and they shook hands with the most serious expressions." Catherine brushed her hair, the blue ribbon now carefully mended lying on her dressing table. "If he does, it will be because he wants to, not because he needs my land or my family name." "Do you love him?" Emma asked, her eyes bright with romantic curiosity. The question gave Catherine pause. She had never allowed herself to consider love a factor in her future. Security, stability, duty, these were the considerations that had guided her acceptance of Thomas Wilkes. But with Jackson, yes, she admitted, the truth of it warming her from within. "I do love him." Emma squealed with delight, hugging her sister tightly. "I knew it, and he absolutely adores you. Anyone with eyes can see it." The following Saturday, Jackson invited Catherine for a ride to a spot he'd discovered on the property, a small clearing overlooking the valley with a view of the distant mountains. October had painted the landscape in brilliant golds and reds, and the air held the crisp promise of winter. "It's beautiful here," Catherine said as they dismounted. Jackson had brought a blanket for them to sit on and a small basket of food prepared by Emma, who had been suspiciously eager to help. "I thought you might appreciate the view," he replied, helping her settle on the blanket. "You once told me you'd never seen anything as magnificent as these mountains at sunset." Catherine smiled, touched that he remembered such a casual comment. "You've been paying attention." "To everything about you," he confirmed, his eyes warm as they met hers. "Catherine, these past months have been the happiest of my life." Her heart began to race as Jackson took her hand in his. "Mine too," she admitted softly. "When I came to Colorado, I was looking for a place to start over, but what I found was so much more." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I found you your strength, your kindness, your unwavering dedication to those you love." From the pouch, he produced a delicate gold ring set with a small but perfectly clear diamond. "This was my mother's," he explained. "She told me to give it only to a woman with enough fire in her soul to warm even the coldest nights." Catherine felt tears gathering in her eyes as Jackson continued. "I'm not a man of flowery words, Catherine, but I know what's true and right, and loving you is the truest thing I've ever known." He took a deep breath. "Will you marry me, not for land or money or any reason except that I can't imagine my life without you in it?" The tears spilled over as Catherine nodded, too overcome to speak for a moment. "Yes," she finally managed. "Yes, Jackson, I will marry you." His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of devotion. When they finally parted, breathless and laughing, Catherine reached up to touch the blue ribbon in her hair, the ribbon he had rescued and tied back for her the day everything changed. "Keep wearing that," he murmured, pressing his lips against her temple just as he had that first day. "It reminds me of the moment I knew for certain I wanted to spend my life with you." Their wedding took place in the small church in Silver Creek on a clear November day. Unlike Catherine's planned wedding to Thomas Wilkes, which had been arranged with businesslike efficiency, this celebration grew organically from the genuine affection the town had developed for the couple. Martha Higgins, perhaps seeking redemption for her earlier cruelty, contributed arrangements of dried autumn flowers for the church. Samuel Thompson stood as Jackson's best man, and Emma, radiant with happiness for her sister, served as maid of honor. Catherine wore a simple ivory gown that had belonged to her mother, altered by the town's seamstress to suit her taller frame. And in her carefully arranged, auburn hair sat the blue ribbon, a symbol of all they had overcome together. "You look beautiful," her father said as he prepared to walk her down the aisle, genuine emotion making his voice rough. "Jackson Turner is a fortunate man." "We both are fortunate," Catherine replied, squeezing his arm in forgiveness and love. As the church doors opened and she saw Jackson waiting for her at the altar, his eyes filled with wonder and love, Catherine knew that sometimes the most unexpected journeys led to the most perfect destinations. The ribbon in her hair, once torn by scorn but mended with care, had become a testament to the kind of love worth fighting for. One built on respect, understanding, and the courage to see beyond appearances to the heart of what mattered. When Jackson kissed her after their vows, his hand gently brushing against the ribbon in her hair, the entire congregation erupted in cheers. Silver Creek had witnessed many love stories in its frontier history, but few as genuine or as hard-won as that of Catherine and Jackson Turner, a love that began with a torn ribbon, a moment of kindness, and the promise of something true that would endure through all the seasons of their lives together.